Thank you, Mayor Fallon. Thank you for your patience. Trustee Mackin. Present. Trustee Farino. Here. Trustee Rohrmeyer. Here. Mayor Fell. Here. Deputy Mayor Rosenberg. Here.
Thought it was a public meeting.
Yeah, but I don't want my pictures taken, so just sit down.
You don't want your picture taken?
No. Well, take everywhere else.
Okay. I'm with Central Press,
I don't care.
and you don't want your picture taken?
No. Thank you.
Did that answer that? Okay, right. Never heard of that.
Okay, we'll begin today with the budget presentation. We'll start with the enterprise fund budget. I'd just like to remind everyone about the enterprise fund budget. The golf season starts in April, and we begin the process April and May, and 2/12 of every budget goes to the previous season. So as we move forward in this budget, 2/12 of the budget comes back to this season, and that's because the village budget goes from June to May 31st, and the golf season goes from April to the end of December. So we always move 2/12 of the golf budget into the previous year's budget. In the golf budget for this year, the enterprise budget, the total expenditures for the enterprise is $2,687,601. The total revenue is $2,687,000 and $2,687,601. In that budget, there is one new employee for $42,000, and that person is being employed because the hours of the golf course are from 8 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night, and they do need one additional employee to cover all the hours. So that new employee will begin this year. The equipment lease for the year is $130,452, and that's equipment that we lease for the golf course. And a lot of the equipment at the golf course, greens mowers, fairway mowers, they're used every day, and we lease them for a period of 5 years, and then we release them. We lease them for another 5 years, new equipment. We are purchasing, not leasing, 2 new sprayers, and that will cost the enterprise fund $100,000 for 2 sprayers. And we are also purchasing 2 new ice machines, and they are $25,000 for the 2 new ice machines. We made some major changes on the 4th and 5th holes, both around the green areas, and the cost of that is just a little bit over $100,000. And one of the things in revenues for the golf course, we're estimating this year will be for membership $1,628,550, and the director of golf came up with a wonderful idea about 3 years ago, and that is charging a special assessment. Every member pays $250 above their membership fee, and that special assessment this year will come to $98,250, and that money is used to make improvements in the golf course. And this year, last year, that money was used to for the 18th hole to make recommended changes to the 18th green. We took out a pond that was there, and we redid the fairway probably from 150 yards out toward the greens. Greens fees, this year, that special assessment is doing the updating around the greens for holes 4 and 5, and that cost was a little over $100,000. Greens fees for non-members coming to the golf course, we're expecting the greens fees to be $160,000, and cart rentals, we're expecting cart rentals to be $255,000. So that is the golf enterprise fund. Again, the total expenditures for the enterprise fund is $2,687,601, and the total revenue is $2,687,601. Our membership is, as of right now, it is 392 members, and we will keep it right about that level. Depending on village residents that haven't joined yet, we do not turn away any village residents who want to join. So, although we're at our cap for membership, if a village resident wants to join and they haven't joined yet, they will be allowed to join. So we expect the memberships to be somewhere around 400 members, 402 members. Just last year we had 402, and we expect basically the same amount of members this year. Okay, board members have any questions on the enterprise fund budget? Okay, the general fund budget is the budget increase is 6.37%. The tax increase is 6.67%. The total budget is $5,689,478. The tax revenue that will be generated to equal that amount is $3,181,028, and other revenue from the village comes to $2,508,450,000. The treasurer position, there's additional money in budget. There's an additional $32,800 in the village treasurer, so that whoever we hire, there's enough money in that position to pay that salary and benefits for the village treasurer. Salary increases, we are in the third year of a 5-year contract with employees. The first year of the contract, which was 3 years ago, was a 1% increase. Last year was a 2% increase. This year is a 3, next year is a 3, and the final year of the contract is 3.5. So we're at a 3% increase this year, and that 3% salary increases in the budget for next year. The salary increase for all village employees comes to $34,189. Public safety, thanks to Assemblyman Joe DiStefano, we received a $50,000 grant, and we are purchasing a new code car, and the village portion of that code car is $28,000. That's in the budget. In fact, the whole $78,000 for the code vehicle is in the budget. We have to spend that, then we apply to the state, and we are reimbursed $50,000 for the grant from Assemblyman DiStefano. CHIPS, which is road work in the village, we are expecting to spend $70,343 on road work. The community center, we are expecting to spend $187,000. in improvements here in the community center. Fire Island Beaches, $5,500. The dock, $5,400. Cost of employee benefits, social security increases, workers' comp increases, disability insurance increases. For all employees in the village, it's $57,939. Our insurance increases for the year, it's about a 12% insurance increase, and that comes to $27,500. Village Hall, in this budget, there is a $50,000 for a new roof and $55,000 for improvements in Village Hall. We know that the outside walls are bowing out, and that was expressed through an engineering study that we completed in the winter. And so total to Village Hall, the roof and the building is $105,000. Ferry repairs, $60,000. We are also purchasing 2 new payloaders, and we are doing this in a leasing program. One payloader is from the 1980s, and the other payloader is older also. So we're going to get the 2 new payloaders on a leasing program, and that will be $80,000 a year for those payloaders. Tax increase for the average home assessment in the village. The tax increase will be a total of $165.96 for the year. And tonight we're going to, of course, there's a 2% tax cap that we have to have an item to pierce the tax cap. It's very interesting, I've said this before, in school districts, and why this is different, I don't know, but in school districts, all capital projects in the school district are funded, and the capital expenses are excluded from developing the tax cap. In municipalities, villages, all capital expenses, for example, bonding, any purchasing that you do in a capital form, in municipalities and villages, the capital expenses are included in the 2% tax cap. And so I've talked to Albany 8 years about why this happens, and no one seems to be listening, because no one has taken up the cause to include or treat villages in municipalities the same way they treat school districts. So all our capital expenditures go towards the 2% tax cap. So to recap, the village budget this year is $5,689,478. Tax revenue will make up $3,181,028 of that, and other revenues that the village receives will be $2,508,450. So again, the tax increase for the average assessment in the village will be $165.96 for the year. Do board members have any questions? Okay. I guess the first thing I need is a resolution to approve Pearson at 2% tax cap. A motion? Mike, second. Nathan, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Approved? Motion carried. resolution, for a public hearing, to, review the full budget. Um, I have to go back. I have to give the resident an opportunity to make comments about piercing the tax cap. So I need a resolution to open the public hearing for piercing the tax cap. Motion? Steve? Second? Nathan? Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Would anyone like to make a comment about piercing the tax cap? Seeing no comments, we did pass a resolution to pierce the tax cap, so we won't go back and do that. Now I need a resolution to approve a public hearing set for April 10th at 6 p.m. We're gonna do 6. We're gonna do 6 o'clock for budget hearing.
On the 10th.
On the 10th.
Yes.
6, starting at 6.
Yes, it's here's later in our agenda, but thank you, Mayor Bell.
Okay, so approve a public hearing for the 23-24 budget to be set for April 10th at 6 p.m. Motion?
Motion.
Nathan, second. Steve, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, you wanna- we're going to open the portion of the meeting to the public. I'm going to ask anyone who would like to make a comment about the lease agreement with the country club not to come up now. We will give you an opportunity to do that when we bring that up on the agenda item. So is there anyone who'd like to make a comment, a public, a comment on anything except the lease?
Point of order, Mike, may I make a motion to move up an agenda item number 11 to the top before we get into that?
Item number 11.
I'd like to second that.
The lease agreement, okay, so we have a motion to move the lease agreement to the top of the agenda, item number 11. We have a motion, second discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. David?
Actually, it's number 11, so another motion to table item 11 to next one.
Okay, motion to table item 11.
Mayor, for clarification purposes, for the audience who can't hear, there's been a motion to take number 11, which was the vote to, on the extension of the license agreement to this Bellport Country Club. That motion was approved, and now there's a motion to table that vote until the next regularly scheduled meeting of the village board, which has been duly made and seconded. Can we have a roll call vote?
Roll call vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Trustee Mackis?
Here.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
That's why everybody's here.
Keep in mind, it's just the vote on the motion, not the presentation.
Table it though.
The tabling the vote, not the presentation.
Thank you.
That's what I clarified.
Trustee Farino?
Yes.
Trustee Rohrmeyer?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Rosenberg?
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion passes to table the vote for the country club lease. And now I will turn it over to treasurer's report, financial. Yeah, I did. You no one wanted to talk.
Mayor Fell, I had heard from a resident who said that they were hoping to begin at 7 or thereabouts, because they did have a comment. Would you oblige that? Because Okay, thanks.
Okay, report.
Ray, just for clarification purposes, we voted to table the vote on the extension. The presentation is agenda item number 10 will still proceed in its due course this evening. It's been tabled to the next regularly scheduled meeting, which I believe is April.
Will
24.
Thank you.
everyone here understand when it is? I mean, it's not gonna be at
Sir,
He just said April 24th.
come up to the microphone if you have a question. You have a question?
We're not answering questions.
I talk loud.
When will public comment?
Hold it. When it was open to the public, no one will make a comment. When we get to that point, we'll have a chance.
Guys, please give the mayor the opportunity to run the meeting. We understand that, I'm gonna say most, if not the majority, or all of this audience is here to speak on the Bellport Country Club extension. That presentation will begin at item number 10 on the agenda. The mayor previously made a statement that please reserve your comments on that until that resolution agenda item is called. At that point, a motion was made to table the vote has been tabled. The presentation will happen in its due course at agenda item number 10. Is that clear? Thank you.
Okay, resolution number, 10, we'll start with the presentation.
Mr. Mayor, I move to change the order of the presentation and to
Bob, I see to interrupt. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a packed audience this evening. We're trying to accommodate the comment. What's happening now is we're trying to move it up in the agenda to have it heard, but we can't do that if the audience is mumbling amongst themselves. So please, let's keep some decorum. We know it's a contested topic. We know there's gonna be vibrant discussion, but let's respect each other and the process, please.
I move that we move agenda item number 10 to the top of the agenda and talk about it now. Is that what you want?
Okay, motion? Second?
Second.
Nathan, discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. So, I will turn the meeting over to you, David, for comments.
Thank you, Mayor. I was asked by the village board to present the parameters and how we got to the framework of the proposed draft lease that's been made available to the public in reference to the extension of the Bellport Country Club agreement. On the outset, please understand that this is a negotiation process, and anyone who's done any negotiation realize you get some, you win some, you give some up. That's part of the negotiation. It'd be impossible to think that any negotiation on any topic would completely satisfy everyone in this room today. However, based on the responsible conduct of the board, and I'll talk you through the timeline, you will see that this board believes this to be a financially, fiduciary responsible thing to do to the village, and hopefully my presentation will explain some of the information that's out there as to why they believe so. On the outset, this negotiation was spearheaded by learned counsel and our deputy mayor, Bob Rosenberg. It began back in 2000, it began on May 14th, 2015, where the country club reached out to us to begin the process of negotiating an extension pursuant to the terms of the lease. Now, understand that there's also been a lot of talk about the public only having 32.5 hours to review. There's also been other talk that they didn't turn over a document that's in draft form. Also, please understand that there is no municipal requirement legally to make a draft lease or license public. Understand that. Also, there is no legal requirement to hear comment on a lease or license extension based on its terms. It could simply be a resolution agenda item approving the deputy mayor to execute the extension. This board took it upon themselves to be transparent, to provide that license agreement, even in its current draft form, a week before it was going to be heard and spoke about tonight. And understand, the resolution tonight is not to, would have been not to approve any license agreement, but to authorize the mayor to execute it upon its completion. So again, please understand, there is no legal requirement that this draft copy of a license agreement be made public, ever. But this board, to be transparent and open, believed in an important enough topic, and based on some of the rumor, conjecture, and hyperbole that was circulating within the village, thought it important to at least put it out there for review, so when everybody came this evening, maybe some of your questions were answered, or some of your comments can be focused on the actual language in the lease, in the license, and I'll explain how we got there a little later on. But again, please understand that that effort was to be transparent and open and honest. There was no legal requirement to do so. This process started in 2015 when the country club came to us seeking an extension. Now people are saying, well, why are we doing this now? Well, let's talk about that. We're doing this now because it started 8 years ago. And if there's 4 years left on their agreement and they started today and it took 8 years, guess what we would not have? A caterer. We'd have a problem like we had in the grill room. So 8 years ago, they came to us and said, we'd like to talk about an extension. This board, again, with their fiduciary responsibility in mind, hired more than competent real estate counsel to review the original agreement and all of its various codicils. I think there's 9 such amendments to the original agreement. And let this board know, because that document and those documents were signed prior to this iteration of the board, to let them know their rights and their rights and obligations moving forward. That gentleman was the name of Vinny Messina. He'd be here this evening. However, he is the current sitting Suffolk County surrogate judge. That position bars him from participating in public discussion as of this. That process, and I don't know if anyone's ever seen the various iterations and documents associated with this license or this old lease agreement, but it's voluminous. He went through that document with a fine-tooth comb and produced recommendations to the board on how to move forward. One of those, and the most important of his conclusions, was this needed to be a license revocable by the village pursuant to New York state law. Again, a license revocable by the village at any time pursuant to state law. Now, why is that important besides the fact that we could revoke it, or any iteration of the board could revoke it at any time? Because it takes us out of the alienation requirements on our park, and our park is the golf course. There's been talk out in the world about how we can't do this because it violates alienation. It does not. There's 2 reasons it does not. One, an exemption to alienation is the fact that it's a revocable license by the village. And the second thing that takes it outside alienation is the country club is used in the past and is currently used in conjunction with the operations of our park, and this park happens to be a golf course, and it's accessory to the golf course. You cannot have a golf outing at the Bellport Country Club run by the village if your dinner and your award ceremony and everything that happens on those grounds are not furnished by the country club. So the most important part of Vinny Messina's research was the alienation requirement and the fact that we needed to make a license in order to avoid being subject to alienation laws. That being said, that took about a year, year and a half or so to get to completion, which brings us to about 2017. And in 2017, the matter was referred. In fact, I have a report. Again, another misnomer, which was how come this report did not go to the Bellport Finance, Policy, and Budget Commission? It did. I'm holding in my hand the report dated April 2018 from the Bellport Finance and Budget Commission entitled BCC Concessionaire Review and Analysis. This document, given to us by the respected people of this village who are on our finance committee, sets the groundwork and the principles for the license agreement that is currently drafted in its entirety. There's nothing in that proposed license agreement that did not come from this document, which was the recommendations of the commission. That being said, we got this agreement in 2018. The mayor and deputy mayor, as I said, who has more than a wealth of experience in negotiating a little bit probably more important deals than the Bellport Country Club, to his credit, began to open negotiation process with the caterers in an attempt to extend the lease based on the recommendations of the finance committee, and I'll get to some of their suggestions in a minute. And right now we're talking about the timeline. We all know what happened in 2019. The caterer was closed for 18 months, kind of halted negotiations about their solvency moving forward. In fact, we weren't even sure we have a caterer on the other end of it. Something else that was discussed in the public, which I need to dispel. They did receive PPP funds. They did not at any point receive rental relief. Rental relief would have been required that the landlord, us, execute documents in furtherance, and that check for rental arrears would have been cut to us. It did not happen. It did not happen likely because it was their position that this was a force majeure event which caused, by an act not of their own, which forgave them their rent during this 18-month period. And I'll touch on that a little later as well. So the PP money that's been circulated that they did receive went to making sure that when we came out of that COVID period, that they still had a staff to begin working. It went to pay the salaries of the staff, not the proprietors. It's my understanding that the 3 proprietors and managers all went on unemployment during this time period. And they used that money to ensure that their staff was taken care of. Any comments to the contrary that this is a hurry to get done under this administration simply doesn't accommodate the facts of the negotiation. And in fact, if this board decided to push it to the next administration, whatever action that administration takes would also bind, if they follow the recommendations of the finance committee, the next administration as well. And I firmly believe that had COVID not happened, this document and this extension would have happened and occurred not 3 or 4 months before the end of this current iteration of the board, but probably in 2019 at some point. So here we are. At the time, back in 2018, it was referred to the Bellport Finance Budget and Policy Commission. I'm going to read some of that document to you now. The village board has asked the commission to examine all of the economic, fiscal aspects of the proposal and make a recommendation to the village board. The village and its real estate attorney, at the time was Vincent Messina, has indicated the village must change the existing lease to a new form license agreement, and one that requires the tenant to pay for any and all capital repairs and maintenance during the duration of the agreement. Then they do, to their credit, an empirical analysis and a matrix that I will not pretend to understand, but I can read their conclusions. In all due respect to Foster, I hope that the conclusions are what you say they are, because again, it kind of looks like this with a bunch of numbers on it, running their previous financials to determine their solvency throughout the life of the agreement. Their conclusions were that their analysis showed a very strong management team that can grow top-line revenues while controlling operating expenses. It also says that historically the South Country caterers have maintained a facility in good condition. Quality of catered events is consistent with the standards desired by the village. and they focused on higher end catering such as weddings and have avoided running higher volume, lower end functions and events. Again, through this process and all the various comments on social media and otherwise, not a single person has said, we need to get rid of that caterer. And that's also a recommendation of the commission, that if the village board does not do this, you run the risk of exactly that, as we know happened with the grill room during that iteration when they vacated the grill room. We put it out to bid, and we took the lowest responsible bidder, who proved to be the lowest responsible bidder when he shut his doors 3 months later and left us in the lurch. Another comment by the Bellport Budget Commission. Any landlord, and I'll plug in the village, must be very sensitive not to overcharge rent when leasing space and any operating business such as a catering business. The real estate industry recognizes that rent should be between 10 and 15% of total expenses for any operating company to be successful. If the cost of occupancy rises beyond this range, the operating company tenant will have a much more difficult time succeeding in paying rent. Translation, it's the solvency of the entity that's occupying the municipal entity that is important. And it's the industry standard suggests on how the rent should be calculated. And they make a suggestion, which I'll get to. Some of their conclusions. We recommend that the village should agree to extend the existing lease for an additional 20 years. The recent financial performance of SCC is strong enough to justify the credit risk to the village. They also recommend a 3% increase to the rent, which the current license agreement suggests. They also suggest that all building repairs and capital improvements to our asset should be done by the caterer. This agreement puts that responsibility solely on the caterer. The village must have language to monitor that. We do. There was also in the, it's mentioned in this report, but I'll discuss it now. Again, a draft license agreement that was distributed. That license agreement included language about us owing the country club money for past gas expenses. There is no money owed at this time to the country club for past gas expenses. Part of the capital improvements that need to be done to that building is the separation of lines between the men's locker room and the grill room. When they came to us after paying 10 years of our expenses, 10 years of paying the costs for the grill room and the men's locker room, they came to us and saying, you owe us all this money. The village, again, delaying this agreement somewhat, was the analysis that needed to take place as to what that was. We put in meters, and we agreed that we would monitor the cost of the grill room and the cost of the men's locker room, and that's the number that we would be bound by moving forward as a repayment of the previous 10 years of them paying all of our bills. All of that money has been paid every year, and the reason why that paragraph still exists, until such time as those lines are completely separate, every December, a reconciliation happens where we do an analysis of those meter readings to determine how much money we owe them for paying the bill for the grill room and the men's locker room. It has nothing to do with them asking for money up front because they are cash poor. That was another comment that was out in the universe. So moving forward through the recommendations, this country club, the finance committee recommended that the conversion of the heating plant to oil from gas, that that should be done by the country club. According to this agreement, it is. There is one thing in this agreement which fell by the wayside of negotiation, and that was the reimbursement, a recommendation by the finance committee that we be reimbursed a portion of the paving of the country club. That was lost in negotiation. The final conclusions of the finance committee said that if the village doesn't do this, and doesn't extend for 20 years, and doesn't do a 3% increase, and doesn't make them pay for those capital expenses, what would that mean for the village? And I'm reading straight from the report. The village would keep the existing lease and all its terms and conditions in place, quote, warts and all, end quote. The current contracted rent increases are today 2.5. The village would have to pay for all building repairs and maintenance items. They estimated in 2018, 500,000, and long-term, another 500,000. I will tell you that as of today, we presented a tentative budget. That tentative budget includes a tax increase of 6.67%, as the mayor highlighted earlier. If we took on $1 million of bond money and the associated costs, that tax increase would jump to 9.69%. If we had to take $1.5 million to do those capital improvements, which include the roof, the gas, and other things that need to be done there, that tax increase would jump to 11.2. So when I hear things, or I read things, or this board reads things that this is fiscally irresponsible, understand that there's two ways that this could end. The village does nothing, and in 2 years, because let's agree, anyone who has children or has participated in their own wedding generally book their venue a little more than 2 years in advance, for the most part. So we would need to put these items out to bid now, if we chose to get rid of the caterer. And that's the one comment that has not been said by anybody, that we have anything but, and I quote the Finance Commission, a top-notch caterer. I've been here in various iterations and forms since 2008, and I've never heard or attended a meeting where anyone came and said, that caterer did this. We never got a letter from a resident or otherwise who said, I had my wedding at this venue and this is why it was terrible. We don't get those comments. Again, off the recommendations of the Finance Committee, if you put this out to bid, and you quote, you run a significant risk of not finding a top-notch caterer to replace South Country caterers at the equivalent economics. And how do you avoid that? You don't put it out to bid, which is the fiscal responsible thing to do based on the numbers. Now, we have a license, we currently have a lease, we have a rolling lease. That rolling lease suggests that this document can be extended on its terms. It can be extended on its terms. And it can be extended on its terms for 20, 25, 28 years if it can be articulated the reason why. Our bond money would be probably for 30 years. They're asking for 28 to make themselves whole for the capital improvements that they're not strapping this village with. Can't guarantee that from anyone who wins the lowest bid. You can't guarantee that if you did put this out to bid, if you chose that route, you cannot guarantee that the South Country caterers would win that bid. You can't guarantee that the next caterer will do these capital improvements. You can't guarantee that you'll find another caterer that will live in this village since the 90s and not receive one single complaint. You run that risk. Why run that risk when you don't have to? Why not follow the recommendations of the Finance Committee who was charged to make those recommendations and gave us the industry standard as to rent, which is, and their recommendation, a 3% increase. This current version of the license agreement, that 3% increase starts upon execution. Not in 2027, when the other agreement expires. It starts today. Now let's talk about another important role in this. When force majeure happened and they declared a force majeure event and the governor shut down the caterer for a period of 18 months, it is our position that we were owed $288,000. Trust me when I tell you, it was not their position. They thought, and it all stems on one single word, and that word is suspend. The prior agreement suggests that during a force majeure event, the rent is suspended. They interpret suspend as meaning forgiven. We interpret suspend as meaning something that's not forgiven, that might be due later, suspended for now. Make no bones about it, if the village avails itself of putting it out to bid, and the South Country caterers either win or lose that bid, we'll be left litigating for that $288,000. Why do that? Why not do the fiscal responsible thing and get the money when they're willing to pay it? Now, because it's the settlement, I would say settlement of possible litigation, okay, great. We didn't get 5% interest for 8 years, but guess what we got? $288,000 that there is a very gray decision on whether or not that we'd be ever entitled to that money. Certainly not entitled to that money because it's already been broached and both sides agreed. If we extend, we'll agree to pay. That has to be factored in to when the public talks about that this board acted fiscally irresponsible. This village followed every letter of the law to make sure they were being fiscally responsible. Except when I advised them that they didn't have to put my draft agreement of a license negotiated by the deputy mayor out for the public to view prior to its execution. And when various news entities, because there's some very diligent people in this room, reached out to various news entities, and they called me and wanted to know why this was controversial, and how come we only gave 32 hours, I said, how long have you been covering municipal government? When's the last time someone called and complained that someone only had 32 and a half hours to speak on a draft license agreement on a municipal property? Answer, as it should be, is never. Because what should have happened legally is an agenda item setting forth authorizing the mayor to execute the extension, period. Again, reiterate, because it's important to me, honest and transparent government. The comment that we're about to hear at the conclusion of this presentation is solely rooted on clear, honest, and transparent government. And what I read and how this board was judged for that without understanding the law was interesting to me, to say the least. This board, starting in 2015, hired a real estate professional. There were statements to the contrary. This board sent it to the finance committee. There were statements to the contrary. What was out in the public was, you need 3 proposals, fair market value appraisal. Our experts told us that's not the real estate standard to calculate the rent. The hurry. It's not the hurry, this is the conclusion. This is the conclusion of 8 years of hard work by this board, by Vincent Messina, by Deputy Mayor Rosenberg, and by the Honorable Finance Committee. This is the culmination of those efforts. They got rental assistance. No, they didn't. Why isn't there interest on the rental arrears? I'd rather not pay interest on the rental arrears than litigate for 5 years to try and get it with no possible guaranteed outcome. That's why it's a negotiation. We don't owe anything to the caterer currently for any gas payments. until the meter is rectified by them. Those payments of anything we owed for the previous 10 years of them paying our bills has been satisfied by the village. The caterer is not strapped for cash, which is why they want the money up front. In fact, we do still owe them money. We owe them money because a previous iteration of this board gave them the opportunity to remove themselves from the grill room and bound this board to pay a substantial amount of money for the capital improvements that they did to the grill room. I think currently $51,000 is still owed. So what we're doing, because it's the fiscally responsible thing to do, is we're satisfying that debt, and this document will not be executed until that satisfaction is given, by reducing the force majeure money that they owe us, which is not guaranteed money, but negotiated money, by that amount. So when Finance Committee, although they couldn't see into the future and recognize there may be a force majeure event, and said, hey, you guys should make sure you split the cost of the parking lot, we did one better, I believe. We satisfied all of our debts with them and still getting to the tune of $235,000 in rental arrears that not every landlord in America got when the government shut down all the businesses. Because why do it? Why not put it out to bid? Why not run the risk of losing all of that? Because it's the fiscally responsible thing to do. Golf memberships. Golf memberships, one, includes a membership only. It doesn't include card fees. It doesn't include bag fees. It doesn't include whatever other fees. It includes a membership. That term has been in every iteration of this agreement since its inception. There is no village resident on a waiting list because 4 memberships are given to the country club. In fact, there is nobody on the waiting list because 4 memberships were given to the country club. Again, I reiterate, every version of this document, going back to its inception, gave for a foursome of membership to the country club. The way it's calculated is, 1, it never affects a village resident. The village resident can sign up at any time. That wait list exists for people who are not village residents, because what we don't want is a proliferation of outsiders coming into the village and making that an amenity not as good as it could be. What's the purpose of joining a private country club that still takes 8 hours to play? So we cap that membership on outside village residents, but we never cap it -4. We always cap it +4. So if the number is 375 outside memberships, the real number is 375 +4, because it's never, ever held against anyone that wants to join, because we gave memberships to, or whoever was in charge in 1990, gave memberships to the country club. That is, again, just simply, and any empirical analysis based off that, again, is not rooted in fact or truth. It just doesn't happen. Again, no one from the village is on a waiting list to play in our golf course. The number is calculated by outsiders, not village residents, who join our country club, plus the 4 we've given them. Last year, although they were given 4 memberships, only 1 member played, and he played 15 times. Again, there was no rental relief. There was also questions about, we need this kind of insurance. I'm sure someone who made that comment is in the insurance business. We don't get involved in what our risk manager tells us the insurance should be. We take every single agreement and we send it to our outside risk manager, who I believe is Salerno Brokerage, and they tell us, it's a non-negotiable point. They tell us exactly what our insurance requirements are, and those are put into the contract. That is not negotiated. If you don't like our insurance requirement, you don't get to play here. Again, it was brought up. The other thing that as I'm going through all of the emails and everything that we received, is the fact that the proposed caterer can just hire anybody to do these capital improvements. That is not true. They have to follow, and there's a paragraph in this license agreement that says they have to follow all state, federal, local laws, including that if you're doing capital improvements on a municipal-owned asset, you must follow municipal procurement procedure. Again, you must follow municipal procurement procedure. They can't say, hey, wait, we're gonna do the roof, but my friend Bill's a great roofer, we're gonna just have him do it. Unless that friend meets all the governmental requirements for procurement and wins that bid. So what are we left with? We're left with a proposed draft license agreement. And I will readily admit, when I fought them not to make it public, it's a draft. It does need a little work. Some of the things I think it needs out of the gate is those capital improvements are not tied to anything. There's no deadline. The other thing that's out there is that the village didn't do, we needed to do a survey of the building to see exactly what was needed. We did that. We did it back in 2015, we did it in 2018, and we did it recently. There are some significant things, most of which, and most important of which, is probably needs a $500,000 roof out of the gate, and the gas conversion needs to be complete, and there's some other electrical work. Understand why that's important. They hold us harmless for those improvements. Right now, if our roof collapses on their dance floor, who do you think is responsible to not only rebuild the roof, but also their dance floor because of the upkeep of the roof? Again, the fiscal responsible thing to do. So again, in conclusion, the license agreement proposed sets forth a 3% increase, the term of which was predicated on the amount of money they'll need to expend in reference to the capital improvements they need to do, and we are requiring them they do. The rent above what is owed includes force majeure money that there is a clear legal question on whether or not we're entitled to it at all. And further, the monies that we owe them in reference to a previous administration binding this board to capital improvements made to the grill room, which, by the way, 12 years later, we're still paying off. And that was only 150,000, not 170, not $1 million, or as the committee recommended, or the commission recommended, suggested in 2018, 500,000. Again, this process started in 2015 with hiring a real estate expert. That expert made recommendations to this board. This board then forwarded it to the Budget and Finance Commission, who gave us a report which set forth the principles and the roots of the agreement as it was negotiated by our deputy mayor and learned counsel. The outcome of which is a document that you guys had the opportunity, this public had the opportunity to view in the interest of open and honest and transparent government. Here we are. We're not rushed. We're not hurrying to get this done. This is the culmination of effort that was hampered by COVID. Again, coming out of COVID, we weren't sure if we were going to have a caterer. They were closed for 18 months. You do any type of real estate, good time to buy was coming out of COVID because there was a lot of vacancies. This negotiation took a period of time, culminated by the document that you see today, or that you had the opportunity to review. Again, as the gentleman who negotiated the agreement, the most important fact of this is that this needed to be, to avoid alienation, a revocable license. This is a revocable license. You can revoke it at any time. I don't purport to be a real estate appraiser, but I know I own a house. And if someone can take away my house tomorrow, at will, what value does that have to me really? My number one asset in my life, my home. If someone could just walk in and take it tomorrow, why run the risk of putting at the bid? Why run the risk of getting appraisals for that entity when the industry standard, as recommended by our experts, was that's not how you should be calculating the rent? Why risk losing the catering? Because again, and I conclude with, the extension is the fiscally responsible thing to do when you consider all of the factors as I laid out. With that, Mr. Mayor, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you, David, appreciate that. Any board members have any questions?
I want to thank David for all what you said.
Thank you. Second, third, and fourth, thank you. Now we'll open up the public, if anyone would like to make a comment, you line up the microphone.
In reference to public comment, and this is said at every meeting, not necessarily this meeting, because we want to curb any comment, but if you hear something that has already been said, please feel free to lend your support to that idea. For instance, you should put it out for appraisal. If someone gives us a 20 minutes of soliloquy as to why we should do that, please don't come and echo it, just acknowledge it and say that you would rather that to happen in order to keep this moving. If it's heard that we're just repeating the same factors over and over and over again, we'll have to gain some control so everyone gets their opportunity to speak. With that, I yield to the public.
Thank you. Leslie O'Connor, Woodland Park Road. Many of you sitting up there know I was deputy mayor. In 2015, which Mr. Moran brings up, was the start of negotiations for this continuation of the lease agreement. At that time, I think Mr. Foster is behind me. I'm so happy to see him online. The Finance Committee outright rejected that proposal. So I'm not sure when negotiations started up. It must have been sometime after I left the board. I would like to state that I valued greatly at that time the contribution of Mr. Foster and the entire Finance Committee and lending a lot of expertise and clarity at that time. My concern right now, today, especially after hearing your very good presentation, thank you, Mr. Moran, and before I start, I really want to thank you all for voting for moving this up and for changing the vote to next month. I think a lot of people share my opinion that the public sometimes feels not heard when you have when you have discussion and then immediately vote on an issue. It's easy to feel that our input is not taken seriously whatsoever. So I appreciate very much the delay in the vote. So back to the subject at hand, the Finance Committee review of that 2015 proposal. So there was another review in 2018, as you say, Mr. Moran. Since then, we have had COVID. And as you say, this lease is a draft. There are issues you would like to see changed. I would urge this board as strongly as I possibly can to delay vote until that final document can then be turned over to the Finance Committee for its review. A review done 5 years ago on a document that has been in negotiations for that many years, with the change of COVID, it needs another review from our learned experts on the Finance Committee. I urge you to postpone that vote even further until the final document is reviewed by them. And I would urge those sitting on the board, especially those for whom this is a very big first-time vote, to listen to the public, to take your, do your due diligence, take your time, do not be harassed, do not be bullied, do not be held to, you said before, don't be held to that. Vote your conscience, and again, please postpone your vote until our learned expert can look at that very final document upon which you will vote. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Well done, Leslie. Mike Foster, 1 Baycrest Avenue since 1976. Chairman of the Budget and Fiscal Policy Committee, along with Jay Diamond, who is also a member who will speak after me. I'm trying not to think too much about what was said about what we did and how we advised the board back in 2015. But let me summarize what happened very quickly. In 2015, we were approached by South Country Catering to add a 20 extension to an existing 11 years remaining on their lease. We sat down, negotiated in good faith for 9-10 months, had an agreed upon term sheet, sent them a draft of the license agreement, got the comments back from their attorney, and they over me that had previously agreed. I'm sure Leslie remembers this, Bob remembers this, Mike, Ray?
No, I don't remember that, no.
Okay. Anyway, that's what happened. And so the result was we recommended that the village not, and it was presented as take it or leave it. And so we recommended that they wouldn't talk, they wouldn't negotiate, so we should drop negotiations. Subsequently, we never got involved in any more negotiations with South Country Catering and the license agreement. In terms of moving forward and this license agreement, we have asked several times if the village board would like us to weigh in, and they said it wasn't necessary. I think they're probably relying heavily on the work that we did 8 years ago. It's not an apples to apples situation to today. For example, inflation was running at 2% back then. A 3% per annum increase might make some sense. Today, when inflation is running at 6%, I'd have to rethink that. We didn't have COVID. We didn't have suspended rent. We didn't have a war. So I think we have not seen this agreement. We don't have a view on this agreement because we haven't seen it and we haven't been able to study it. I happen to think that if we did look at it, we probably would agree with a lot of what's in there, because I did have a chance to read through it without taking notes for about 15 minutes, and I recognize some of the language that was in it 8 years ago. So we are a friend of the village. We are a friend of the village board. We consider ourselves a trusted advisor to the village board. We would be happy and motivated to take a look at this and provide our feedback to the village board going forward today at any time. We're prepared to help, and that's what we do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everybody. My name's Jay Diamond. I'm on South House Point Road, and I've been a member of the Budget and Fiscal Policy Commission since its formation in 2012. So we've been around a long time. We've done a lot of things for the village. I think we've made a great contribution to the board over the years, and in so doing, made a great contribution to the residents of the village. Our first project, the reason we were formed when Ray and Bob took office, was to right-size the debt of the village. You may recall the prior administration had overborrowed. We had more debt than we needed, and we had a lot of cash sitting in our bank account. And so we looked at this, and we had, in addition to ourselves, Doug Watson is on the committee. He works at Moody's Investor Services. My wife, Alex Leventhal, was in the municipal bond business. So we had some expertise. We had them we recommended that they pay down the debt that they didn't need with the cash that they had on hand, and then set up a much more flexible financing schedule, which is tied to FEMA payments. And we helped those negotiations, set up 2 lines with a local bank. One is related to CapEx that has a FEMA reimbursement, and one CapEx that doesn't have FEMA reimbursement. So it's a very flexible, kind of a pay-as-you-go way to fund these projects. So again, we think we saved the village thousands in interest over the years. We also drafted new cash management and budget policy statements that were recommended by the rating agency that we have in place if we wanted to increase our village credit rating. We helped draft those. They were adopted by the board. Having a higher credit rating in bond land means you pay a lower interest expense. So we've done these things over the years. And then we were asked to look at this lease agreement. We were constantly being asked to opine and advise and help out on matters of significant financial importance to the village. We will only do it when we're asked. We're not given information if we're not asked to do it, and when we do it, we in good faith, always provide that. In fact, we were just asked to review the license and lease agreement for the Bellport Bay Yacht Club down at the marina, which is expiring in May.
You weren't asked to do that. You did it, but you weren't asked to do it.
We weren't asked by you, but we were asked. So, I'm sorry.
Well, who did you ask by? No one on the board asked.
We did the work.
Well, I don't know who asked you, but it was no one on this board.
We did the work. And my point is, we did it in good faith because we wanted to help the village in any way that we can. So we were surprised to come here and have our work from several years ago as the foundation for recommending and talking about this lease that's currently under negotiation, when we have not been asked to look at it or review it, or even been told this is going to come up to this meeting today. So a lot of these people here are going to talk about process fouls in this whole process. You know, when and how you share information. This to me was an extremely bad process foul that you did not reach out to us. And we're happy to look at it now, between now and the end, or whenever you want, because there are some significant questions that we would have to ask once we get a chance to look at it. And Council did give a good presentation. He brought up a lot of points that I think we have a lot of follow-up questions on. Again, hopefully we can help you and the village come to a good agreement with the caterer.
Thank you.
My name is Brian Ursino. I live at 4 Gerard Street. I'm just going to be referring to some notes and replying to some points that were brought up in the presentation, and echo some sentiments from the gentleman in the Finance Committee. Thank you for the presentation, first and foremost. You answered a lot of questions that I had, but you did bring up some additional questions that we can follow up on later. Negotiations started back in 2015. Obviously, that was a different world. You got to relook at pretty much all of those business points and put them in today's context. I understand you have a legal obligation to make any of this public, but I don't operate my life on what I'm legally obligated to do. We all have moral and ethical compasses that we should be following, and since you are elected officials, this should be as open and transparent as possible. So I appreciate some of the sentiment. If this truly is not a hurry transaction, I think you can put that to bed pretty easily by just pushing this off into the next administration. I think that would put a lot of people at ease. If that's not the case, I think we should be given due time to go through documents and work with the Finance Committee to figure out a solution to this problem. You reference a percentage as determining the appropriate rent for a space and saying that that is industry standard. That is not industry standard. You don't look at the percentage of a current occupant's business and then put a percentage on that to what they can afford. That's their business problem. As a real estate owner, you determine what the market rent is for your space, and then you go find an occupant who can support that with their business. That brings me to the follow-up. were there any other opportunities explored as to what you could do with the space? Could you subdivide the space and keep this tenant in there? Could you use a different space for a different occupant? None of these things were brought up as even thoughts. You know, I think this is part of my argument. This is a fatal flaw of the entire argument that you're bringing to the table. You're not looking at this from a real estate perspective. This is a real estate opportunity on an asset that is owned by the village and needs to be treated as such. You say you can't guarantee that a new company would come in to do CapEx. Of course you can. It's called tenant improvements. They could be a requirement of any new license or lease for a space, and perhaps you could split it with this tenant. You could finance some of that, you could have them come to the table. There's a lot of things you can do when you find a willing tenant who has the ability to operate effectively in the space. Not to mention that if you improve the space, it might garner more business for them and you can charge higher rent. So at sometimes when you have an old building, you're only able to achieve a low rent. If you put money into the building by the way of CapEx or working with the tenant to improve that space, you can do more business, they can afford more rent. It's something that should be thought about, and the finance committee can help participate in some of that analysis. Moving on. A couple of comments. I was sat and read this license agreement today. I would say, to give you some context, I've got 22 years of experience in commercial real estate development, finance, closed the deal in almost every state in the United States, including Long Island, New York, all the surrounding states. And I read through this agreement, and I gotta say, in honest opinion, it cannot be signed in its current form. Even if you guys move forward, seriously needs to be struck completely and redrafted. There's a lot of issues in the language in there that make it just open to litigation. A few business points that I can bring up to put on the record. The water bill in the current license agreement is paid by the village. That's not industry standard for any restaurant or catering company. They should be paying the water bill. This should be addressed. A 2053 initial term, that's crazy to give someone a 30-year license agreement. I understand you're bringing up some points here. And I'm going to flip to the last comment that I had because it was put at the end of the license agreement. And you're bringing it up as kind of a catch-all, which is that the village has the right to cancel this lease at any point, for whatever reason. That is actually not true when you read the language in the agreement. You're opening yourself up for litigation if you think that's the case. The language, there's already a typo, first of all, there's a typo in the language of the cancellation, which is crazy. But it says that the village can't cancel a lease for arbitrary reasons or capricious reasons. These are subjective terms that any deal that I'm ever a part of in my 22-year career, I would never agree. I would strike that, get rid of it, come up with some language that's reasonable. If the village truly needs the ability to cancel it on an annual basis, then it just needs to be a rolling one-year lease. Or something along those lines, or just more reasonable cancellation terms. You're also saying stuff about percentage rent as it relates to the business being able to afford the rent. You have no way to determine what the performance of this business is. The license agreement doesn't provide for the village any access to their financials or tax returns. That's crazy. You should put that information in the license agreement. The tenant should provide you with their financials, give you books to show you how they're performing, so you understand what your tenant is doing, and you're not surprised when they can't pay rent during COVID and use PPP money only to pay for salary and not to pay for rent, which, by the way, you were allowed to do. You have no minimum standard of quality of maintenance of the CapEx or any other work that's done. You just reference it has to go through a certain process, but you're not setting an actual standard for what that work should look like. The default provisions in the license agreement are extremely weak. The language is not sufficient to cover various scenarios in which we would want to call a default on the tenant. And lastly, there's many more comments, but for point of just giving you a flavor of how flawed the agreement is. The cancellation language, we have to reimburse the tenant if we cancel, terminate their lease for their improvements to the space. But if we're canceling them for cause, why would we do that? Thank you for your time.
On my green Google, 41 Station Road, and as noted earlier, I will not cover the points that were well made by the previous speakers. I appreciate all of your contributions, and they were very full and covered many of the points. As a layperson, David, I'd like to thank you for a very full, expanded explanation. But it, again, as a layperson, it left me with a lot of questions. I don't necessarily understand the difference between license or lease. If I understood you correctly, the reason to go to an unrevocable license was something to do with alienation, again, something I don't truly understand, but something to do with if the catering hall decided to separate itself from the golf course. I don't really, isn't that something that could be put into the lease, that they're not able to do that? Or again, as a layperson, I have a lot of questions. If it were to go out to bid, does it have to go to the lowest bidder? Or can there be contingencies written into it that it go to the most qualified bid? Again, as the last speaker noted, you absolutely should have right to financial records. As somebody who operated and owned a restaurant and catering business for 12 years, 2008 through 2019, I can tell you that catering is a lot more predictable and profitable than a restaurant. When you go catering, 2 years out, as you noted, you know what your menu is, you know how many people are coming, you know what your costs are. So again, the point that any potential lessee or licensor, their financials and their past record should be considered. And again, is that something that when you're, if again, if it were to go out to bid, is their financials and their past record taken into consideration? Does it have to go to the lowest bidder? And again, potentially somebody that couldn't, fulfill their obligations. You talk about a $500,000 roof. Again, the fact that the lessee or the licensor has to cover some part of that would be part of the negotiations. You said at the beginning, negotiations are a win and a lose. So again, I appreciate you putting this off. I hope that more residents ask questions, again, as lay people, and I hope you do the right thing. Thank you.
I'm Peter Schulte. I live at 9 Rogers Avenue. The last 30 years, I've bought and overseen over 60 companies that work exclusively in the services area, working directly for and with the US federal government. That's all I do. Contracts on a service basis with the government. I would not normally speak up in a forum like this, except where I think there's an issue with public policy and a matter of equity. And I think that's now. So Mayor, fellow trustees, I certainly appreciate your service with the Bellport community and the hurdles you leap to do a great job. It's not easy, right? No one wants that. It's not so easy, particularly sitting here like this. But I do think that at this point, with what will be 60 days to go in the term of this mayor's administration and some people on there, it's 90 today, it'll be 60 when you finally come up for a vote. It's almost a breach of a spirit of term limits to actually make a decision like this at this point in time. It's not normal to press forward on an issue like this when there's that short amount of time left in administration. And it's normal to leave the decision such as this to the successor mayor and the administration, to give them time to understand the needs of Bellport, particularly when there are 4 years left on the lease, notwithstanding how far ahead people book their weddings. This lease, or a lease, can be signed at any time between now and the end of the lease term. It can be done in the next 7 years when whoever is running this town gets a handle on what the priorities are in their view. And I learned many years ago from a very intelligent person that in decisions like this, you actually wait as long as possible to make the decision, because it will provide you with maximum information on the state of play. You should definitely wait as long as you can, because you'll know what the needs of Bellport are, the financial situation of Bellport, what the state of the market is, et cetera, et cetera. It's the way we do it, all right? And whether or not you RFP it, or you go to your favorite son, that's a decision to be made in the future. And maybe there'll be a lot of vendors, and maybe there's some mitigating circumstances that would say otherwise. But it appears, to do this now, that you do not trust your successor. But it's really up to the people of Bellport to trust your successor and the decisions they're going to make. This is all the more important because it's a big issue for us. It's one of our biggest revenue sources. And so taking your time, understanding the next moment's priorities are probably very important and relevant, as opposed to tying the hands of the successor who's going to be in that hot seat for the next couple of years. But that's all I've got. I would say that, you know, I don't want to qualify whether it's a good or bad management decision. I have lots of opinions on content, but that's not what I really want to talk about. But it's not a particularly good policy decision. Thank you.
I'm going to be super brief. I'm Lucy Schulte-Danziger. If we look alike, it's because that's my brother. I live at Point Road. I've been a Bellport taxpayer since 1990, more than half of my life. And I've spent many years as a reporter, a journalist. I worked for the New York Times. I've been a magazine editor. And my very first assignment for the Star Ledger was to go to a meeting of the New Jersey Turnpike Authority where they were putting bids out for toilet paper. I thought that was really crazy. Then they talked about expanding the thruway, and it was a front page story. But nonetheless, I was there to hear about bids for toilet paper. So I just, while we were sitting here, looked up the New York State Comptroller's recommendations for local governments and school districts, which are required to advertise for competitive bids when procurement exceeds certain dollar thresholds. Purchase contracts involving expenditures in excess of $20,000, that would be the ice machines, and contracts for public work involving expenditures in excess of $35,000 are generally subject to competitive bidding under the law. We're talking about New York State law, which, as far as I'm concerned, this is a village within New York State, and I know we run this like our own little government, but we're still legally required to follow the comptroller's legal guidelines. Now, I don't expect that we need bids for toilet paper when we go to Village Hall, but we do need bids for our largest line item on this budget, which is a $5.6 million budget. And if you do the math, and you know how much weddings cost, we had one in our family last year, it's crazy how much people spend on weddings. And if they're doing weddings several times a day, all summer long, that is the biggest contract we have. We need to go to bids. Thank you.
Good evening, board members, mayor, and village attorney Moran. I just want to say that I am proud of my community for coming out and voicing your concerns and ideas. It takes a village to hold our elected officials accountable. This process is beautiful, and my heart is warmed by this participation. Mr. Moran, you did refer to your real estate as a metaphor to this negotiation. And I will add to your metaphor, I don't think you would ever consider renting your home out to someone unless you had a value assessment done as to what is the maximum rent you could receive for that property. So I would urge this this village board to at least do the following, and it may not be a legal requirement, but please secure independent professional appraisals of the asset in question. Let's find out what the rent is for the square footage. Does the board even know how much square feet is being rented in this property? That's rhetorical. I wish I knew. I can't find out that information. Can someone share that information with me now here? How many square feet are we talking about? And what is the going rate for similar square footage in the area? I understand there's a range between $30 a square foot at a low end to $70 a square foot. I spoke to a restaurant owner who owned the Round building on Montauk Highway in Brookhaven Hamlet, and he says the going rate for square footage of turnkey operations in Patrick Village is $70 a square foot for rental. And so let's find out what that number is. Let's find out the value of our asset. Let's get a hard number, and then let's discount the rent from there. Let's find out a hard number with regard to truly how much it's going to cost to do the renovations, repairs. Let's lock that number in as well. Let's get an accounting mechanism in place. And I thank the gentleman from Gerard Street, the gentleman from Rogers, and Lucy, and everyone else for your great comments. Thank you for your time.
I want to thank all the previous speakers and will not repeat what they said, but I did want to supplement the comment.
Your name, please?
I wanted to supplement.
Your name?
Oh, Ann Hayes, Price Street, around the corner from you, in Bellport. I wanted to supplement the comments made by one of the speakers about process. And note that on the agenda, there was a provision that's now been put over till the next meeting to authorize the mayor to sign the document. It's not even in final form yet. I would suggest to you that there's not any mayor or anyone else who's going to want to put themselves in the position of signing a document that has not been approved in its entirety by the entire board. So I hope you will keep that in mind when that next comes up on our agenda. Thank you.
Good evening, board. How are you? Meredith Tinsley, 44 South Howells. I'm the youngest member of the Tinsley family. I shouldn't say that at 52 years old. We've been here decades. So just to, I almost want to say, reiterate everything that everyone else is saying, especially that young man on Gerard Street. Thank you. Because all of us, including myself, who is not only suffering from Lyme disease, I have a severe disease called lupus. It is affecting my internal organs. But I came out here tonight to find out exactly what's going on. And I agree with every other speaker up here. We need to know what's going on. And I want you guys to further examine what needs to be done before running off and doing something that's not even required for 4 more years. Okay? And on that note, thank you for everyone else who stood up here and said something.
Motion to end the,
Ray, there's really no requirement for that motion.
Okay.
There's no process for this.
okay,
You just
move on,
move on.
treasurer's report.
Ray, before you move on though, I would give an announcement that if anyone wishes to leave at this point, so we don't have an exodus while we try to conduct business. What I said is we have the rest of the meeting to do, so in order to avoid us not being able to conduct that business while everyone is leaving, if you choose to leave, now's a good time. But feel free to stay.
The group in the back is really. Okay. Treasurer's report, financial abstract, summary of abstracts, exhibit 1, review of year-to-date financials through January 31st, 2023. Resolution, approve general fund checking abstract report, one consisting of 70 vendors. General fund expenditures, $154,260.78. Enterprise fund expenditures, $11,799.55. Total expenditures are $166,060.33. Motion? Mike, second?
Second.
Nathan, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Resolution approve the enterprise fund checking abstract report 2 consisting of 13 vendors. $118,979.98. Motion?
Motion.
Nathan, second.
Second.
Mike, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Resolution to approve the capital general fund checking abstract report number 3 consisting of one vendor totaling $1,050. Motion?
So made.
Nathan, second.
Second.
I'm sorry.
Steve,
Steve,
second.
motion, second, Nathan. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Resolution, approve the presentation of the 23-24 tentative budget by the budget officer. Motion?
So moved.
Bob, second.
Second.
Steve, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Maybe
Motion,
if we could get to that topic 5.
motion carries. I did that.
So I
Oh, I'm
believe
sorry.
we did.
Resolution to approve the capital, grounds lane, and dock fund checking abstract report number 4 consisting of one vendor totaling $3,575. Motion?
Motion.
Nathan, second. Mike, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Mayor Fowler.
Okay, 7, 8, 9, 10, we approve those. I'm sorry.
If we could do 9 and.
7, 8, and 9, we approve.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So 7, 8, 9, we approved. I'll just review that. 7 was piercing the tax cap. That's been approved. The 9 approved, approve an open hearing for the tax cap. That was approved. And approved piercing the tax cap. That was approved. Approved the public hearing for the 23-24 budget to be set for April 10th at 6 p.m. So we will we will meet April 10th and at a public hearing, set of the approval of the budget for the 2023-24 year. Okay, item number 11, we moved that to the front of the agenda. That was the lease agreement, review of the lease agreement. Okay, number 12, approve a public hearing to be set for the Incorporated Village of Bellport Cable Agreement on April 24th, 2023 at 7 p.m. We have an agreement with Cablevision, and that agreement is ending, so we have to approve the new agreement. Maybe we should pass it on to the next board. So that will be done on the, we'll have a public hearing on the 24th for the Cablevision agreement. Approve. I'm glad someone understood that.
We did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It was tongue in cheek. Thank you. Resolution approved the 2005 Chevy Expedition Vehicle Unit V3 to be excess. That's a 2005 Expedition that has run its course in the life of the village, and we are going to, we will put that out for bid and sell it to the highest bidder. So we'll do that this month, hopefully at the meeting on the 24th of April. We'll have someone that purchased that vehicle.
Quick,
Yes.
it's a typo. Chevrolet Suburban.
Chevrolet Suburban, sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, that's right, Expedition is a Ford, right? Chevy Suburban.
I'm a car guy, it's gonna just drive me crazy, sorry.
Chevy Suburban. Motion?
Motion.
Nathan, second? Mike, I'll take this, I gotta take Steve as a second, because he,
Second.
so to say, okay, second. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Resolution, accept the FEMA communication regarding project worksheet 1615, COVID reimbursement funding has been paid and the project is closed. John, this is not the, pavilion down there, is it?
No, for COVID.
For COVID.
For COVID, yes.
Very good. Motion?
So wait.
Steve, second.
Second.
Nathan, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Resolution, accept and approve a service contract from Pinnacle Land Surveyors LLP for the golf course survey project in the amount of $59,000 that will be paid for through the enterprise fund. We do not have a survey of the golf course. We don't have one, and we should have one. And the DEC wants us to flag out the freshwater wetlands. So while we're doing that, we'll do a survey of the whole course, so the village has that survey. I need a motion.
So move.
Bob, second.
Second.
Steve, discussion?
Mayor, should we share that cost with them? Since it's something, it's an asset of the village.
No, this is, the enterprise will pay for the whole thing.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Updates, FEMA submission. We received, John, I've got to, I mean, I'm in village office a lot. And I know what you go through with FEMA to get money from them. And we just received, we received 1.1 million, and you have just submitted another partial payment for 1.2.
We received the 1.1 for just in time to pay off our ban, Mayor Fell, and we're continuing to submit. Next submission will be change orders, and it's over $700,000.
And that will be deducted from the 1.2 that we still are owed, FEMA still owes us.
Correct, yes, that's right. And then there's going to be the final, hopefully the final submission for the remainder.
Well, again, I have to, on behalf of all the residents of the village, I have to thank you for your dedication, number one, but the fact that you never let them get away with a cent.
I try my best, and thank you, Mayor Fell, and I want to thank this board for all of its support through the years. As we know, we're coming, we're past the 10th anniversary of Sandy. We were so grateful that we finally won the award with FEMA, and now we're, on track for receiving reimbursement. So thank you, likewise, to the board for their support.
So hopefully, when we, it's going to take months and months to get the 725,000, but once we get that, we'll be under the $1 million mark.
Yes,
for,
and then we'll be on to the
money
next.
that
Yes.
we're trying to get back from FEMA for the project. And a lot of residents don't understand that we do get these grants. This was a grant to redo the bulkheads around the yacht club, around the marina. And we have to borrow that money first, do the work, and then apply for reimbursement. It is a process. And so we're thankful we're on the right end of that process. And John, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Phil.
On February 13th, the village received the first payment, partial payment of 1.1 million directly into our dime bank account. And that was the first payment that we received. And it's funny how we received it. We didn't get a letter. All of a sudden, our treasurer comes to us and said, I don't know what this is. We have $1.1 million in our bank account. So we had to go and find out what it was. We didn't get a letter from FEMA saying you're getting the money. So it's a good thing that knew what it was about and didn't spend it on something else.
Yeah, Mayor Fell is correct. It states in the agenda on February 13th is when we noticed this had arrived in our account. We had submitted for this partial payment September 11th of last year. The likewise with the change orders, our first draft was done in November of 2021. So we had a full year, November 2022, and we're still working on, we're almost ready to make our submission after all these months. One might think that all that time is incredible, which it is, but FEMA is very diligent and vigilant, and they keep on asking questions, and we must answer them all before they'll award us our partial payment.
Another interesting fact is that we were awarded, Senator Schumer was very kind to the village and his staff when he made the award to the village for $2.8 million to redo the Marina Basin, the dock area where the boats are, and over at Hohum. And we soon learned after the award was made and we knew we were going to receive this money. All of a sudden we heard that the money is being given to HUD, and that's the Housing and Urban Development, and we had to go through HUD to get the money. Well, that took a while, and we did get our application into HUD, and we have heard from them that they did receive our application, and that they, I guess you just had to fill out some more paperwork.
Yes, and they're also giving us the opportunity, which we'll be discussing in our next work session, to increase the funding that we had received for soft costs, which would include engineering fees and fees for environmental studies, surveys, etc. So that's before us. We've been concerned because of inflation, supply chain issues, which have pushed up costs. So this gives us an opportunity to revisit our design plan and what our needs are for both the Marina Basin on our side here and likewise Hohum, our marina at Hohum.
So we will begin the process of looking at that, and we make the application directly to HUD for the increased funding.
Yes, that's correct, yes.
So we will move forward with that. Now, on March 6th of this year, we made a submission for additional money from Congress, and the additional spending request is for fiscal year 2024. It's for coastal, Howes Point Coastal Resiliency Project, and the village is asking for $4.44 million. The submission includes terminuses at 3 Street, South Howes, Thornhedge, and Otis, and the erosion on Howes Creek. It was delivered to Senator Schumer's office and Senator Gilbrand's office via federal internet portal, and we are hopeful for the next step in the process with the State Appropriations Committee for further consideration. We are also in the process, and we have completed the submission to U.S. Representative Garbarino's office, and that was sent on March 14th, 2023. I don't think the village will get any money from Senator Schumer. He has given us $2.8 million, and I don't think he is going to give us another $4.4 million, but we're hoping that either Senator Gillibrand or U.S. Representative Garbarino's office will pick this up, and pardon?
Can we write letters and tell them how desperate we are?
I will get in touch with you, let me find out, let me find out if that helps. If it does, we'll do that. I'm not sure it helps, but I will find out,
Okay, that'd be great. Thank
okay? So we're hoping that, either, Senator Gillibrand or, Representative Garbarino, will look kindly on the village, with, some of that money. And that money, again, just like the 2.8, the 2.8 at this point, once we get all the paperwork completed, we have to borrow that money. So it's 2.8 that we have to borrow, and we have to pay principal and interest on that all the time until we get the money back from the federal government. So once we move forward in that, in the next budget cycle, we would have to budget for the interest and the principal and borrowing. Now, of course, once you begin paying the principal and the interest, when you get the money back at the end, you've paid that principal and interest already, so that comes back into the village. And the principal and interest that you paid, you're not paying again. So with the 2.8, with the $2.8 million, once we borrow that, and we begin using it, we'll probably borrow it on a 5-year ban. And as John said, what we'll do, and what we did with the main pier project that we did, and we borrowed the money, we were sweating. We were hoping to get the 1.2 million back before our ban was up. Not that it was up, that we had a February payment that we had to make, and luckily, John made calls, and we got our $1.2 million about a week before our principal and interest payment was due at the bank. So we avoided that, which was great. But you get this money, and believe me, it's wonderful. But it's a cost, because you have to borrow it, you have to pay the interest and principal on that. But when you close out the project, any interest and principal that you've paid, when you close out the project, that interest and principal comes back to the village. So, but you have to wait till the end. So we'll see where that goes, and we are hopeful that either Senator Gillibrand or Representative Garbarino will be kind to the village and appropriate $4.4 million for us to move forward with our Howells Point Coastal Resiliency Project. That would be very good news. And New York State budget funding request to Senator Murray and Assemblyman DiStefano. We made this budget request to them on February 9th. And the request that we made was for $230,000 for repaving Livingston Road, $200,000 for repaving Bellport Lane, $625,000 for repaving Beaslin Road, $240,000 for repaving Colonial Lane, and $185,000 for repaving Circuit Road. So I shouldn't say I guarantee, but I pretty much guarantee we're not going to get all of it. But I'm hoping to get 2 of them, maybe $500,000, and that would be wonderful. And would pick off a couple of these projects and then reapply next year. Update on the Bellport Village Sustainability Plan with Johnson Controls. John?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Fell. As you recall, since last August, we began work with Johnson Controls, taking into consideration all of our infrastructure within the village and making an assessment. So they came, not this past work session, but the previous, for their presentation after all their work. And again, the focus of this the Johnson Controls project has to do with sustainability. So their original proposal came to us. They came here in Village Hall and they had explained that the project would cost $2.4 million. There were several items on the list. The board had considered what had been presented and asked if fees could be reduced, in particular with the add-on that they had, the management fees that would come to Johnson Controls for oversight of these projects. And also we asked if we could reduce the program that they were suggesting to us. In my mind, when you undertake this type of project, you're not certain where it is going, in this case, until the end. So we weren't aware that the fees would be $2.4 million when we started, and of course that's true because the assessment hadn't been made. So they gave us the scope that they were interested in pursuing, and they've come back to us after we asked the questions if it could be reduced, and they've come back to us with a 12% reduction by amending the projects, one of which was for solar panels in this building on the west side of the building, and also some weatherization projects throughout the village to improve insulation. So this is an update, and we will keep you posted as to how this progresses.
Thank you, John. Update on Browns Lane Shore Road.
Yes, as we all know, the Browns Lane Shore Road project is taking far too long. Browns Lane basically is complete, other than the surfacing of the hydrodynamic separator went in most recently. The next piece of the puzzle is Shore Road. Shore Road is a country lane. It originated probably with a dirt road. There's no stormwater drainage system there. Since we changed elevations on the main pier, it's affecting Bellport Lane and also Shore Road. So we're hoping very soon to meet with the board with the final plan for the stormwater drain system of Shore Road so that we can proceed with that construction. You'll also recall that there is a home being built on the south side of 14 Shore Road, and for us it would not make sense for us to complete the project until that home is built, because heavy equipment will be driving up and down Browns Lane and Shore Road throughout that process. So we're hoping to, and again, I see that Jason Crane is with us this evening, our DPW superintendent, and I commend Jason and his team because they are looking to more or less be the general contractor of those that we hire to do stormwater drains. We'll get assistance from our engineer, Adone Austin, in the placement of those stormwater drains and change the elevation so it best serves us versus the country lane it has been for decades. We appreciate the patience of our residents and our trustees for this protracted amount of time for this project. It has been, it seems interminable, but I'm hoping the light is at the end of the tunnel very soon.
Again, thank you, John. Upcoming election will be on June 20th, 2023. The voting will be here in Village Hall, here in the Community Center from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And the positions that are up for election is the mayor and 2 trustees. And both Mike Ferrino and Bob Rosenberg are term limited out and cannot run again, and the mayor is term limited and can't run again. So we'll move forward with a new mayor next year and 2 new trustees, and that will be the first time in 10 years that that this has been done. I know I'll let them speak for themselves at a later time, but I know that both Mike, Bob, and I have enjoyed the 10 years here in the village, and we've always appreciated the support that the residents have given the board. Village Hall Restoration, Diego Steisel and Jason Crane are working to make the improvements in Village Hall to bring the side walls into a safe situation and make it so that 5 years or 8 years or 2 years from now, the building's not going to collapse. So we're thrilled with the work that the engineer has done, and we're always very thankful for Jason. He does not turn his back on the project. He embraces it and works as hard as he can to make it right. And also, I'd like to bring attention to Teddy Hermes, who is a part-time worker in our highway yard, in our DPW yard. I'm going to just show a picture. This is a steel beam that Teddy has put together that we're going to use, and I'm not embarrassed to say, I mean, there's no reason really, I should know, but I don't know how many he's making, but he's probably making 3, 4, 5 of these.
I believe it's 4, and
4.
Jason, you can correct me.
Yeah, 4.
4.
He's making 4 of these, and they will be installed in Village Hall. You won't be able to see them, they'll be behind the walls, but they will be the structure that will give the Village Hall walls that will not collapse. And Jason, thanks to you, you're here tonight, thank you. Teddy's not here, but I'm always absolutely amazed at some of the things that Teddy Hermes does. He's just incredible. I don't know if any of you remember a program on television called MacGyver. Yeah, he was always, he invented things, did things. Well, Teddy Hermes is Bellport's MacGyver. If you need something done, he comes up with a way to get it done. We really appreciate Teddy. And as I said, Teddy's a part-time worker. He worked for many, many, many years in Suffolk County as I think an operator of one of their piece of equipment. He retired, and Jason had the good sense to talk him into working part-time at the village, and he's just incredible what he can do and what he does for the village. So, Jason, just express my sincere thanks to Teddy tomorrow. Thank you. The boards. The board, I'm sorry, Mike, yes, the board's thanks to Teddy. Yes, thank you. Budget calendar, Monday, April 10th, budget vote at 6 p.m. The board will adopt a budget for next year. In the 22nd year, Bellport Village has been reinstated as Tree City. And we have 2 people to thank for that. One is
Right, it takes a village, so more than 2, but Yvonne Hammond and Sherry Bennington have been spearheading it.
Yeah, they were the force behind it.
Yes, the major force.
Yep. So thanks to Yvonne and okay, a resolution for special events. We have the Bellport Brewing Company. They're doing Joy for Jude on May 21st. Boys Girls Club request a round trip to Hum Hum Beach on August 18th on the 10 a.m. ferry, and the drum recital at the band shell Jules Redino. That's April 29th, May 6th, or May 13th at 11 a.m., 1 hour and a half. I have a question about the drum recital. Is the band shell up at that time, Jen?
Yes,
Okay.
it should be, and if not, they'll just use the platform there.
Okay, great. So motion to accept, to approve those special events.
So moved.
Bob, second.
Second.
Mike, discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Review of the proposal draft, meeting minutes, February 27th, exhibit 14. Any questions? Open to the public, does anyone want to say anything? And not, motion.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Thomas Schultz, 24 Country Club Road. Is there any possible way, as you know, Browns Lane is one of the oldest roads in Bellport Village. It was an Indian, Native American path to the water, according to the principal. Is there any way we could get a temporary surface down to allow village residents or anyone to traverse up and down the road before, you know, why keep it closed if there's a way of opening it? Is there any way to open it? I mean, you don't answer questions, I know, but is there any way to open it? It's a rhetorical question, and if so, let's get it open. It's been closed for so long. Is there a way to get a temporary surface down?
No.
I mean, it's done elsewhere.
Yeah, you can't do it.
No?
Thank you.
Disappointing.
Yep. Any other? Motion to close the meeting, motion? Mike, second? Steve, discussion? All in favor? Thank you.
If, you know, I can get the Otis people